So this is Anatomy of a Failed Rape Investigation, Step 5. If we want to fail at rape investigation, the fifth and final step is to pressure victims to retract their allegations. Officers who try to prove that a rape complaint is false from the outset will sometimes pressure victims to retract their allegations. And the thought process is, let me try to prove that the victim is lying, and as part of that, I will pressure them to say that they made the whole thing up. And then I can charge them with false reporting. Now, we need to understand the strategic importance of this strategy to the officer unskilled in rape investigation. By doing this, the officer has closed a case that they cannot solve, a sexual assault, and they have created a crime, false reporting, that they have solved by arresting a crime victim. This is good for their crime statistics. It looks like they are solving cases when they actually aren't. So, charging victims with false reporting for that reason has evolved as a strategy that some officers use to rid themselves of difficult cases without actually investigating them. Solving a sexual offense can take a great deal of time and investigatory resources, and this investment can seem nonsensical to an overburdened officer when easier alternatives are available, namely keeping the offense off the books entirely by pressuring the victim to recant. So in contrast to how difficult sexual assault investigations can be, many officers have discovered that it is relatively easy to get a victim of sexual assault to retract and say they made it all up. And they do so because speaking to a skeptical officer about a traumatic experience is causing them more trauma. And if the fastest way they can get out of that interaction is to say that they made it up, that is what they'll do. But when this happens, the victim is submitting. They are not voluntarily recanting. So let's go back to the Marie case to get an example. This is what happened in Marie's case. And in that case, 2 male police officers threatened her with the loss of her housing subsidy if she did not cooperate with them by admitting that she had fabricated the rape claim. Now, a little context here. Marie was only 18 years old when she was raped. She had grown up in a series of foster homes after being abused as a child, and she was raped while living in the first ever apartment that she had ever had as an adult. She was living there on her own for the first time. It was transitional housing for young people like her, and she had this housing subsidy. So they threatened her with the loss of her subsidy if she didn't recant, and they also wanted a written confession, but they didn't like her initial statement because she said that she actually said she had been raped in it. So then Detective Rickard recorded what happened next in his report as follows. He wrote, "We went over the statement, and I noticed that she hadn't mentioned that she made up the story. I asked her why she didn't write that she made up the story, and she began crying and said that she believed her other story actually happened." So Detective Rickard actually wrote this in his report, and he then pressured Marie to rewrite the statement to his satisfaction. Now, Gail Sherwood also recanted. She told the court after several hours of discussion, the lawyer assigned to her was getting frustrated, and he slammed her file down on the table, and he said to her, "You are going to prison. You withdraw it now, or you are going to prison. You withdraw it now, it'll be wasting police time and a slap on the wrist. If you stick with it, you're going to prison." Gail then insisted she had been raped, and he responded by saying, "You say that once more, and I'm walking out. All you've got to do is say you were sad and lonely and attention-seeking, and they will send you home." Marie and Gail Sherwood both retracted their rape allegations, and then later on, when they got home and away from the police, they recanted their retractions. They did that once they had gotten away from the police and they had a chance to reflect on what happened. Sarah Reedy, the woman who was raped at gunpoint at the convenience store, was similarly pressured by police to retract her rape claim, but she managed to stand her ground. A month or 2 after the rape, 2 officers showed up at her home and pressed her to say that she made the whole thing up. And Reedy stated in her deposition in the civil case, "I asked him to leave several times. Just leave me alone. I said I'm not changing my statement, and he refused. He had me completely hysterical, and it was totally embarrassing. It was totally insulting." So that gives a sense of the intensity of the pressure that victims can be put on by police to retract truthful rape allegations. So the redirect here is, if we want to succeed at sexual assault investigation, never pressure victims to recant. Never pressure them to recant, because there is much evidence indicating that actual victims will recant just to get away from the officers who are making their trauma worse. We must keep our eyes on the goal. If the goal is to apprehend perpetrators, We don't want to engage in behaviors that cause genuine victims to stop cooperating with the police. So we really want to avoid ever putting pressure on victims to retract their allegations. So how can we eliminate the Wheel of Fortune now that we've gone through the anatomy of a failed rape investigation? Join me in the last video for that.